Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm Pamela Price, your host, and this is a space and a place for real talk. This podcast is all about raw, unfiltered conversations about law, politics, culture, education, systemic racism, and everyday events shaping our world. We'll go beyond the headlines to dive deep into how some of our most pressing issues impact real people, real families, and our communities. My goal is to help you navigate the complexities of today's world. We'll break down each episode, an issue, and we'll break it down in a way that's honest, informative, and actionable. We'll hear from community leaders, lawyers, activists, educators, healers, and everyday people on the front lines of change. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Pamela Price, a longtime attorney, political activist, and champion for justice. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to the show. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Today, my guest is attorney Karen Fleshman, a dear friend and an author and an activist in the San Francisco Bay Area. Karen is the founder of Interracial Sisterhood Coalition. Her purpose is to unite women across differences so that we can secure our collective safety and freedom. Karen is a sought after speaker, facilitator, consultant, and coach, facilitating racy conversations at leading companies and building interracial sisterhood at in person conferences and retreats and in an online community, the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition. Throughout her career in the immigrant rights movement and workforce development, Karen led diverse teams and worked for remarkable women of color, leaders who provided specific feedback on her strengths and growth areas. By emulating their practices, implementing their feedback, and listening to her teams, she transformed how she led and how her teams thrived. Now she shares what she learned with others. And I'm excited and honored to have her join me today on Pamela Price Unfiltered. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Pamela. It is such an honor to be with you, someone who has just created so much transformational change. And I'm so grateful to you for your leadership and also for your friendship.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're all on this journey together, trying to figure it out, trying to make it better, doing our part, which is what I really love about you. You doing your part, Karen. So I appreciate that.
Thank
So we are right at the cusp of a very dynamic situation that has unfolded in New York City. So you want to talk about that and what's your perspective on that? You've been following the mayor's race in New York City.
Yes. So I lived in New York City. I actually worked for city government in the city of New York for 10 years. So I follow New York City politics closely. So I was so delighted to see this young, vibrant, democratic socialist, 33-year-old Muslim American, Zohran Mamdani, win the Democratic primary last night and take home 43% of the vote, having spent $9 million, and Andrew Cuomo taking home 36% of the vote, having spent $35 million. Of course, there will be a general election in November, and we're going to have to fight tooth and nail because Lord knows they're going to be spending even more money on that general election. But it's just for the first time in so long, I just felt this sense of hope and that there is a new generation of leadership, and the kind of democratic establishment who had endorsed Andrew Cuomo is really at odds with the Democratic electorate, younger voters, voters of color, and the kind of coalition that Zohran Mamdani was able to build in New York City gives me a lot of hope for the kind of coalition we can continue to build throughout this country and to elect truly progressive, transformational candidates who represent the vast majority. I mean, he ran on an affordability platform, making New York City affordable to people. And in all my canvassing, that is what I heard over and over and over again from people, this sense of just despair over the cost of living, their wages not keeping up, the sense that their kids are going to have worse lives than they did, all of that. The Democrats have to speak to them, speak to us, speak to single moms like you and me, and everything that we've had to go through, and that there's so many more of us than there are of the billionaires.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was refreshing to see that even though the Democratic Party once again was on the wrong side of history, trying to push Andrew Cuomo, who had so much baggage, and yet they still coalesced around him and raised and spent all that money. It was astonishing to me that he would be trying to make a political comeback after having been exposed in so many ways, detrimental to the people. And I understand this is New York City does have ranked choice voting, so they're still voting, right?
Yes, it is not officially, the outcome is not officially declared.
Right. And then in the runoff or in the actual election, he's up against somebody who is accused of corruption and, has a real sordid story about himself as well right now. Do you
Yes.
think voters will be able to tolerate or stomach? Well, first question, do you think the Democratic Party is going to go and support Eric Adams now?
Well, I would certainly hope not. I can't fathom that they would do that. I'm sure there is a whole lot of conversations happening today. New York City is such a patriarchal old boys club style of politics, that makes it very, very difficult for new entrants. And that was why, when Alexandria Ocasio Cortez was able to upset a longtime Democratic incumbent, that was such a huge shock. But the bottom line is the Democratic Party in New York City is really out of touch with the people who live in New York City. And it wasn't just Zohran Mamdani who won big last night. They took 10 more seats on the city council. I mean, it was a big show of support for a much more progressive, much younger, much more diverse group of candidates than who the Democratic Party traditionally supports.
Well, that is refreshing because we see across the country that often, as you said, the Democratic Party is not in touch with the people who we represent. And, you know, there's a good old boy system everywhere, certainly in California as well. And we need to have new and younger and more progressive voices because that's what the concern is, certainly across the country, that the narrative from the Democratic Party is, oh, you guys are too progressive. But in fact, that's what the people want.
That's what the people want. They turn out to vote. I mean, think about uh, uh, President Obama won the majority of voters twice, right? A multiracial coalition of voters who were super inspired to turn out to vote by him, right? But if they're not inspired by the candidate, then they sit home. And this is what we have to do. It's not it's a versus the sofa. That is who we are running against. Who we need candidates that make people excited and feel like we'll fight for them, who understand their affordability issues and really want to create, uh he's pledged to freeze rents. He's worked on behalf of taxi drivers who, through the medallion system in New York City, some of them were committing suicide because it's basically indentured servitude. It makes it very, very long hours and extremely difficult to pay back the debts on this medallion system that again becomes another thing that private equity is investing in. And so I think that this is something that we need to pay attention to, as you were saying, in every corner of our country. How do we win? We win by representing renters and low income home buyers and, just the regular people who are up against private equity swooping in and buying up all the homes and turning them into rentals, and just all of the trends that we've seen over the past 10, 20 years that has just decimated the middle class and any chance of economic mobility.
True. So it looks like in New York, they voted according to their interest, unlike in some other places. And that's what we got to get people to understand. What is in your interest? And you need to vote for what's in your interest, not for what the billionaires are telling you is in their interest, right?
100%. And the billionaires spent a ton of money. Bill Ackman, Elon Musk, trying to get Andrew Cuomo elected. So, yeah, any candidate that the billionaires are supporting is not in your interest
Right.
unless you happen to be a billionaire yourself.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about your work. Tell my audience what is the work that you have been called to do?
So, my purpose is to unite women across difference so we can secure our collective safety and freedom. And how I landed at that is kind of a long story, but I began my career in the immigrants' rights movement, helping people fleeing violence in their countries to apply for asylum in this country, helping permanent residents of this country apply to become US citizens. And I actually worked on an initiative of the city of New York that helped 50,000 New Yorkers apply to become US citizens, something I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
But then we were defunded in the post 9/11 economic downturn. And
Mhm.
that was right around the time that reports came out that said 50% of Black men in New York City don't have a job. And we have almost 200,000 young adult New Yorkers, almost entirely Black and Latino, who are not in school and not working. And coming from the immigrants' rights movement, I found that so shocking. How, immigrants face a lot of adversity, but everybody's working. So why aren't the people who are born and raised here working? And I thought the answer was job training, internships, connections to employers. And I did that work for 10 years, preparing young adults of color to enter corporate careers in technology. And through that work, I became the mentor to many young Black and Brown adults as they began working for tech companies. And this was when I really had to face my racism. Because as I sat across the table from them, I realized I had a lot of harmful assumptions and stereotypes about them. I'm part of the problem and I need to change. And in 2014, I was super fixated on Ferguson because I saw in Mike Brown the many young men of color who I mentor. So when Darren Wilson wasn't indicted for killing him, that put a big pain in my heart. And I went out to brunch in Oakland, actually, a couple weeks after that, with two young Black women who graduated from the job training program I used to work for, have been working for tech companies for a couple of years. And I start talking about how shocked I am about Darren Wilson. And they are like, clearly, you are not paying attention. Then we start talking about what it's like for them at the tech companies. They're like, listen, we're super grateful for our incomes, our lifestyles. We actually enjoy the work we do every day. But coming into work, being the only Black woman, as far as the eye can see, we are bombarded by toxicity, a lot of it coming from women who look like you. And that was that moment when I was like, dang, here I am. I thought I was helping young people. And in a sense, I was, but I was also putting them in harm's way. And I decided to stop preparing young adults of color for the workplace and start preparing the workplace for young adults of color. In 2016, when I saw how white women voted in the presidential election, I said, oh, no, 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 no. We need to start creating a space for women to build community outside of the workplace, to listen to each other's stories, and to start to form interracial solidarity among women. And that was the genesis of the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition.
All right. And so, what have you been doing with that work? How have you been rolling that out?
Well, I've done it through evening events, one-off events where I would gather a group of diverse women to be speakers and share their stories, and invite a very diverse group of women across age, race, sexuality, class, and listen to these stories and then pair them up one on one so that they could respond to the stories and the questions that it raised for them, and then switch partners. So over the course of the night, you get to meet several different women and have like very in-depth conversations with them. From there, moving to online cohorts and really diving deep into who divided women, who our divisions um, benefit, and then the healing work that we need to do as individuals so that we can heal our relationships with each other, so then we can go on to heal our world. And then the request was always, we need more time, we need more time. So I started hosting interracial sisterhood retreats, bringing together
Mhm.
small groups of women. We did one in Miami in 23, one in San Francisco in 24. Now we're headed to Barbados in 2025. I'm super excited about that because I really do believe this is what we need, is to take time and space away from the workplace where we are pitted against each other, and to have space where we're not pitted against each other to really get to know each other. I also do extensive work with white women to help us unlearn our conditioning and learn new beliefs and behaviors so that we can create and earn the trust of women of color, so that we know how to show up in these spaces in a way that is not harmful, but is actually conducive to earning trust and deepening our activism together. Because I say to white women all the time, it's great that you're reading the anti racism books. That is awesome. And we have to go beyond the personal transformation to the societal transformation. And the only way we can do that is through the relational piece, and that's what I'm really focused on. So I have an online cohort for white women called Becoming Trustworthy, and we're just about to launch. We're launching next month, July 2025. So if there's anyone watching here, please DM me. I'm currently recruiting white women who are ready to deepen their activism and earn the trust of women of color for that cohort. And one thing I wanna make sure white
What?
women understand
No.
is how Pamela Price gave us our rights.
Oh,
Pamela, as a Yale undergraduate, very young woman, took on the university to fight to make sexual harassment recognizable, prohibited form of conduct under Title IX. We would not have had that protection if it weren't for you, Pamela. And I just thank you so much for all you have done to advance the rights of all women, to advance the rights of people of color, to fight for the most marginalized people, and to create a more fair and equitable society for everyone. Thank you very much, Pamela.
well, thank you for that. But I want to make sure that the record is clear. I was part of an interracial coalition, and
Mm.
I turned out to be the only Black woman that was actually actively involved in the lawsuit. It was before I became the lead plaintiff. It often was referred to as that silly little lawsuit by those white women, those white feminists who know nothing. But we got past that. And my involvement in the case certainly transformed it, and people can no longer throw that label at folks. And I learned to trust the women that I was working with very much so. And all of them I still consider my lifelong friends. Ronnie
Mm.
Alexander is someone I love and adore, and Ann Simon and Kitty and Hoagie and all the women that worked on my case. We became very close, and we pushed past our own stereotypical notions about who we were, whether you were white or black. We recognized that we were in a fight for gender equality, and we didn't know we were making history as we did, but we knew that we were in a fight and we were there together and we stood together. And so that was one of the great lessons of my life as a young person. Being involved in Alexander versus Yale was a gift to me, and allowed me to go forth. And then a part of my practice became focusing on sexual harassment and representing women of all colors and ages, and in all industries, really. And so that was the gift that I got from being in that position. So thank you. But I got as much as I gave. I will say that. So tell
And
my
I
audience, go ahead.
Oh, I love you sharing that story because we don't see representation of interracial sisterhood and solidarity. Those stories are not well known, right? We either see, on TV, popular culture, we see shows like Sex and the City, Girls, Insecure, showing these very segregated lives of women, and we hear a lot about, the terrible white women, the Karens calling the cops and doing these horrible things, but we don't see very often, or even learn the stories of the incredible transformational power of, as you were saying, lifelong strong bonds between white women, black women, women of color, because I think that poses the greatest threat to white male supremacy and patriarchy, is the idea of women coming together. So I think it's very deliberate that those stories are not widely known. And that's why it's so important for women to share these stories so that we know that these stories do exist.
Right. That it does happen. So you mentioned the 2016 election, and we all know that that was a time where we thought we were going to get a first female president, and it didn't happen. And it didn't happen in large part because white women did not vote for Hillary Clinton, even though black women bit the bullet and sucked our tongues and straightened our backs up and put our big girl panties on and went out and voted for her, notwithstanding our concerns, right?
Mm.
But tell me, what is it that you think drives that disconnect between white women being able to stand together and really fight for our freedom in certain contexts?
Yeah, it's interesting because I live with my 88-year-old mother, and she frequently tells me how grateful she is that she married my husband. Her husband, my father, was a Democrat, because had she married a Republican, she would have voted the same as her husband. And I do think that there's white women who vote straight with their pocketbook. There's white women who vote because they're in these kind of traditional marriages, and the woman is in charge of the house and the kids, and the husband is in charge of the finances and the political decisions. And then there's white women who, many of them have themselves been sexually assaulted, who have this huge fear of their sons being falsely accused of sexual assault. And they believe that by having, patriarchal elected officials, that will protect their sons from being persecuted falsely for sexual assault. I do believe that white women have been conditioned through sexual assault. I'll speak from my own experience. I was raped as a 16-year-old. Content warning, I should have said that. Um, I was raped when I was in high school, and I know it's had a lifelong impact on my ability to stand up for myself, to take a space for myself, and to advocate for myself. And I think there are many, many white women who share my lived experience. And, it's white women, we are being oppressed. We are being taught to hate ourselves by men who we love, like our fathers and our brothers and our sons, and often it's our white mothers who are also telling us things like, oh, you're gaining too much weight, or that's not flattering on you. All of these messages that we're getting, that's conditioning us to feel safe under I know it sounds completely um contradictory, but to that there's something about having someone like Donald Trump be the president that makes a certain group of white women feel safe, which does not make any sense whatsoever, given how he's a serial adjudicated rapist and racist. Um, uh, but somehow he makes them feel secure. And so I think it's a lot of deprogramming that we have to do, a lot of us learning who our real allies are, who our real side is. Okay. The only people who benefit from this are the 1% who are
Mm.
sucking up every bit of power and money, and everyone else is down here, barely struggling to get by. And really, the enemy is division, not people of color, not trans people, not immigrants. And that's why my lifelong purpose is to help reach as many white women as I can, and to be empathetic, and not, how can I put it, um to be compassionate with them and non-judgmental, even if my viewpoint is very different from theirs, because I understand that how they got to their viewpoint is through a lot of intergenerational trauma.
Well, that's deep, and that's, I'm sure, that's an amazing view, and your life's work is well worth it. We need more of it. As we, as a person of color, a black woman, I'm often in spaces where we end up, the only way we can explain why someone is acting the way they are is white privilege. But you have an understanding from your own life experience, and the lens, as you, from a different perspective, that you understand how that is impacting people and why they're doing the things that they do. So that's very
Thank you.
helpful.
Thank you so much, Pamela. And it should not be the burden of Black women. That's another thing that white women frequently do. They want Black women to help them process their grief and shame about being white and all of these things. We should not be burdening Black women with that. We should come together as white women and help each other through that, so that when we show up with Black women, with women of color, we can come and be in true partnership and not zap all your energy trying to assuage our feelings. That is not your responsibility. That is something that white women can do for other white women. And then we can get together and cause good trouble together and also have fun together, right? I love, like, I just had a interracial, I'm sorry, I called it the intersectional feminist potluck on Saturday. We had 16 women, very diverse across generation, ethnicity, sexuality. Everybody brought some homemade, delicious food, and we just had the best time together. And I think that is exactly what we need more of, is spaces to come together, not just seeing each other on social media, but seeing each other in person, and building that connective tissue is so important at this time when we are just bombarded with so much negative, horrible things happening, to remember that there are still wonderful people who deeply care and who are actively engaged in trying to change our world. And when I think of those words, I think of you, Pamela Price.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I know that I was honored to have you come to our recent gathering, Mothers of the Movement, which was another opportunity to celebrate women across generations and of all races and different um, contexts in which they've operated to make the world a better place. So thank you, Karen, for coming and joining me on Pamela Price Unfiltered, because you definitely are a soldier out there and a warrior woman that I'm glad to call you my friend. And I'm honored to know that you're doing the work. And certainly we want to support you however we can. So we will drop a way for people to contact you to sign up. When is your next thing in July?
Well, I'm launching the cohort for white women. It will start in the second week of July. That's online, so you can join from anywhere in the country. I'm also hosting, I'm calling it the Intersectional Feminist Supper Club in Brooklyn. That's an in-person event on July 14th, 2025. And of course, the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition online membership community, you can join that anytime. And that's a great place to meet people across difference.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And it's been a delight to have you. And we appreciate your work and keep on keeping on, making good trouble.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pamela.
Welcome back to Pamela Price Unfiltered. In America, the attacks on elected officials are heating up everywhere. The first nationally televised shockwave was the arrest of a sitting judge. Judge Hannah Duga, a county judge in Milwaukee, was arrested and charged with obstruction for allegedly aiding an undocumented immigrant's escape from ICE agents. United States Congresswoman LaMonica McIver is a Democrat from New Jersey, is facing federal charges of assaulting and interfering with immigration officers outside a New Jersey detention center during a congressional oversight visit to that facility. Then there was the disturbing takedown of U.S. Senator Alex Padilla of California at a press conference in Los Angeles.
And Dallas. Sir, hands up, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have a question for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your
I also want to
hands up.
how many of our ICE agents have been docked.
On the ground. On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands go, put them behind my back.
All right. Cool. Hands in the hand. Lay flat. Lay flat.
Other hand, sir. Other hand.
There's no recording allowed out here.
I did not know.
There's no recording allowed out here for up.
This was the same press conference where moments before Senator Padilla was violently assaulted, the Secretary of Homeland Security proclaimed that the U.S. troops were going to stay in Los Angeles to, quote, liberate the city from its elected officials.
We are not going away. We are staying here to liberate this city from the socialist and the burdensome leadership that this governor and that this mayor have placed on this country and what they have tried to insert into this city.
Most recently, within hours after New York State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani won the New York City mayoral primary to become the Democratic Party nominee for mayor, Donald Trump's appointed border czar threatened the assemblyman, stating that they intend to double and triple down on ICE raids in New York City. Most tragically, in Minnesota, a Trump supporter shot two longtime Democratic legislators, State Representative Melissa Hortman and State Senator John Hoffman, and their spouses. Representative Hortman and her husband were killed. Senator Hoffman and his wife were critically wounded.
The urgent manhunt in Minnesota happening right now. A suspect on the run after what authorities call a politically motivated assassination. Former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark both gunned down early this morning inside their home in Brooklyn Park. Just a few miles away, State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were shot multiple times at their home, now recovering in a local hospital. This video showing their front door riddled with bullet holes. Hundreds of police and sheriff's deputies on the scene searching for clues and a possible motive. Investigators identifying the suspected gunman as 57-year-old Vance Luther Bolter. Several sources telling ABC News that the suspect had a list of possible targets, including Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Several planned protests canceled today as thousands were told to shelter in place.
So clearly, Democratic elected officials everywhere are at risk, especially those who resist Trump's fascist agenda. And Trump and his minions are not letting up. In fact, they continue to escalate the situation with insults and inflammatory rhetoric. Listen to Vice President J.D. Vance.
Makers who keep getting handcuffed. The New York Times just did a story. They keep getting handcuffed, suggesting that the Trump administration is cracking down on Democrats. Can you comment on that?
Well, I was hoping Jose Padilla would be here to ask a question, but unfortunately, I guess he decided not to show up because there wasn't the theater. And that's all it is. You know, I think everybody realizes that's what this is. It's pure political theater. These guys show up. They want to be captured on camera doing something. They want to be able to go back to their far left groups and to say, look, me, I stood up against border enforcement. I stood up against Donald Trump. When all they're really standing up for is for drug cartels to run rampant over our country and sex traffickers to be able to continue to traffic little kids into our country. That's what you're doing when you stand against border enforcement. So I think these guys, we ought to laugh them out of the building. We ought to call them out for doing what they're doing, which is grandstanding. And if they want to work seriously on border enforcement and on keeping their communities safe, the Trump administration's door is wide open. But they're not doing that. They love the grandstanding. They hate law enforcement because they hate the idea of the United States of America having a border. It's a disgrace, but it is what it is.
Ask yourself, have we ever seen anything like this before? The answer is no. What is happening in this season is unprecedented. So what can we do about any of this? Number one, remain vigilant. Make sure you have the right phone numbers to call if ICE shows up looking for you or someone else. Number two, stay prepared. Make sure you have a backup plan for children, cars, housing, or any personal belongings if ICE shows up looking for you or someone else. Number three, stay connected to family and friends. Don't isolate yourself, even if you need to take a break. Studies have shown that interpersonal relationships help prevent depression, anxiety, and fear. Number four, if you need help, ask for it. As my guest Karen Fleshman pointed out, the enemy is not immigrants. It's not white versus black. It's not trans versus straight or male versus female. The enemy is division. As long as people are divided, we can be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. Thanks for tuning in to Pamela Price Unfiltered. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered.
Na, na, na.